this is Tim Jennette, the Metal Meeple, and what do I think of when I think of Christmas? Metal. Because what's more metal than Christmas, right? Well, then it got me thinking that when I get together for Christmas time, my family's all like, oh, you're still listening and playing that metal music, that loud music? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still doing that. So I was like, why not put together 12 games that are super loud? Loud and rockin'. So here's my 12 games that are super loud. So number 12 on my list, and these aren't in any particular order, they're just, I tried to list them on getting louder and louder, but they're no one definitive list or anything. So number 12 is Home Stretch. Now, Home Stretch is a racing game where you're making bids and things like that on horse racing. And much like at the track, if you're playing it with the right people, they're going to get loud. So every time the dice gets rolled, everybody's like, roll a 7, roll a 7. You know, they get into it and things like that. So the only reason it's kind of lower on this list is because depending on who you're playing with, it might just be a stale crowd and they're just like watching dice roll. But with my family and being that we're from Kentucky and the horse and the derbies and all that stuff, it can get kind of loud like you're at the track. Number 11 is a game called Going, Going, Gone. Now, in Going, Going, Gone, everybody gets handfuls of little bidding tokens, and then one player is going to be the auctioneer who's going to count down, and everybody is frantically throwing these cubes everywhere, and it just gets chaotic and stuff, and it gets loud because, you know, the auctioneer is like yelling like 10, 9, 8, 7. They're counting down. All the players are throwing cubes in everywhere, and people are laughing. They're like, get your hand out of my way and stuff, right? So it's pretty interesting how people are reacting when they're playing this game, and it's super fun. Number 10 is a game called Cash and Guns. Now, there's a second edition to this game, so I'm mostly talking about that one, although it does apply to both. But in Cash and Guns, you just robbed a bank or whatever, and there's a bunch of loot on the table, and everybody gets a little foam gun, and you know, at the count of 3, you point at each other, and you're like, why are you pointing at me? So people start making deals, and like, you know, hey, don't point at me, point at him, you know, things like that. So it gets kind of crazy with people making negotiations and talking and stuff. It's just a really fun game, and everybody's yelling stuff. It's just a crazy time. Number 9 is a game called Panic on Wall Street. Now, this is probably the only game on this list that might be a little harder to find because it is out of print. But essentially, you've got a team of investors and a team of, I believe, managers. So you're on one of those two teams, but you're actually competing with your teammates. You want everybody else on the opposite team is your friend, but you're basically putting out these different stocks or whatever, and the opposite team is bidding on those stocks to buy them essentially. And so it's a bunch of negotiations. People are being loud. It's like, we got $5 on this one. Anybody want to put 6? Anybody want to put 6? And you got like, you know, amplify that by 11 people at most. And it's just a crazy time. You can set this up across an entire living room and actually make it where people are running back and forth. It's probably better to set it up at one table to centralize where all the chaos is happening so people don't have to move around. But it gets crazy, man. I really like this game, especially since it's a team-based game and that everybody's yelling and it's like an auction house almost. So it's pretty fun. Number 8 is Two Rooms and a Boom. Now this one is loud, but not in the same sense of chaoticness or whatever. It's just that you got 2 rooms that you physically put the people in, and then in those each room, people are negotiating, they're talking, they're going to each other, saying, hey, what team are you on? Things like that. And there's one person who's trying to basically assassinate the president through a bomb, and you're trying to find out who is on your team, who the president is, who the bomber is, all that stuff. So it's kind of neat to see everybody talk, and then you find out later, like somebody reveals or somebody else tells you that they're not on your team, and you're like, you're lying to me this whole time. And it's just a really cool party atmosphere style game, and it ends up getting loud and it takes a lot of space, and it's just super fun. Number 7 is Dr. Panic. Now, Dr. Panic is one of those games where I first saw another player group playing it, and I immediately had to have this game. Basically, you put like a netting over your hair, and you know, if you want to get more than that, you could put some crazy outfits on if you want to be doctors or whatnot. But each player is going to, you play it with multiple players, and they're going to get into like teams of 2, and it's really loud because you're trying to do your little mini game essentially. There's all these different mini games like stitching up the patient or putting him through an MRI machine or putting all these like electrodes on him and things like that. So once you finish your mini game, you got to run to the next one, and everybody's running back and forth and trying to finish mini games as quick as possible. But then the phone rings because you're using an app to do this, and the phone's like, starts ringing, and you got like, everybody stop, and you listen to it, and it's, gives you an activity to do. Like sometimes you have to get on the ground and count to 10 and then get back up and start over. It's just really crazy. It's an interesting take on an emergency room style situation. So really fun game. Number 6 is One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I didn't want to put too many of the hidden identity games on here because they're all kind of similar, like Werewolf and One Night and Good Cop, Bad Cop, and there's a bunch of them like The Resistance and Avalon. So I chose One Night Ultimate Werewolf because I feel like my group of gamers get the loudest playing this one. Any version of it, actually, with the expansions and such. But it's just really cool to see each player like accusing each other and yelling at each other. It's like, you're tricking me. And, they just get loud and rambunctious. And then once you're done, you're like, okay, that was fun. Let's do it again. And it's definitely a game that you can play over and over and over. And it almost seems like it's louder and louder and louder as the night goes on until eventually you quit. So very fun game. Obviously, this is probably on a lot of lists, but since we're talking about loud games, this is definitely one for it. Number 5 is Dead Last. Dead Last is a party game in which it's super arbitrary on who's going to win for that round. You got everybody's got a little card standee on the table. You get a deck of cards for every player in the game. And then basically you say, okay, who wants to die, right? So everybody starts being like, let's take out blue player. And everybody's like, why are you picking blue, right? And so everybody starts negotiating and talking, and it gets heated and things like that because it's just arbitrary. You're just like, I think we're going to pick this character. And you start throwing each other off by waving a card off to the side, be like, hey, pick the red player instead. And then so you get half the table against the other half of the table, and then people start yelling at you because you tricked them. You're like, you told me you were on my team, right? We were going to pick blue, but then you switched at the last minute and all this stuff. So really fun, crazy card game. I think it's best for me at conventions. It's definitely my go-to convention game, and it's super loud and awesome. Number 4 is Reverse Charades. Now, if you've ever played Charades, it's the same thing, but in reverse. So one player is basically guessing their team and what they're doing up on stage, essentially. So it gets really cool because he's yelling all these words, and everybody's like, what's going on? Why are you picking that? You start cycling through the different moves and such. They might be skydiving, so you're like, parachuting or whatever. And so it maybe not as loud as some of the other games, but usually that one player who's doing all the guessing is super loud and people are laughing and having a good time. Number 3 is Space Cadets Dice Duel. This is a game where you basically play one team, or team versus team, and each team takes up the different roles on a ship. And like a spaceship or whatever. One player is like heading up the weapon system. One player is doing the movement and stuff. The other player is doing the shields. And the 4th player on your team is the captain. So he's looking over. He's not actually got any components or anything, but they're looking over and saying, all right, we need more weapons. We need more weapons. We need to move up and move to the right, and they're screaming. The other team's doing the same thing, but you're trying to listen to what the other team's doing, and you're moving things around. It's a real-time game, obviously. And so it gets really chaotic because you're like, all right, guns are ready, sir, and all this stuff. It's just super fun. It's very thematic to the environment that it is, and it can get quite loud. Number 2 is the classic game Pit. Now, Pit is the game where you basically have a hand of different commodity cards, and you're trying to trade those amongst other players so that you can get a full set of one commodity. So basically all you're allowed to do on your turn is hold up a bunch of cards and say, I've got three, and you're trying to trade those with somebody else. You can't tell them what they are, things like that. Players will trade cards with you, and you're trying to get the card, the full set of that one type of commodity and smack the bell in the middle of the table, and you get points equal to that commodity. So it's super, super loud. Everybody is going absolutely nuts in this game. It's super, super crazy. It's nuts. I do have one honorable mention. It wouldn't be a top list without me doing an honorable mention, but my honorable mention is a game called Liar's Dice. Now, Liar's Dice as a game isn't that loud for the players. Like, the players aren't very loud. But you always know somebody's playing Liar's Dice because it's always everyone shakes the cup of their dice and slams it on the table as hard as possible. So it's like a bunch of silence and then bam, right? And then a bunch of silence and then bam. It's crazy. It's you gotta remind people that people are asleep in your house if that's the case. So interesting. The number 1 on my list has to go to Happy Salmon. It is basically similar to Pit. and it's a small little game. It's a card game. You get like 12 or 13 cards. I don't remember how many, but there's 4 different actions, and just like Pit, you start screaming off whatever action you have next. You're like, all right, I need a fist bump. Anybody got a fist bump? And if somebody else has that card, they can fist bump you. You both throw your card down. There's one that you're rotating around the board. You have to switch spots with people and stuff, and people are just going nuts and running and yelling and yelling. It's all within like 1 minute. So you can just play this game over and over and over. And what's crazier is they just this year released the second pack to it. They're different colors. You combine that all together, and now you have 12 people going absolutely crazy. It's just a really fun time. I cannot recommend this game more enough. So anyway, I hope you thought this list was interesting. Obviously, being into metal, being loud, I wanted to pick something that was kind of similar, and I thought this would be a funny list to do. So if you have any questions, comments below, email me at timjennette@gmail.com. Follow me on social media. And if you want to check out my podcast called Meeplecore, please do. Until next time, keep on rocking and having a Merry Christmas.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.